My name is Cornelia Dinca, and I want to talk about this question. Is your city for people, or is it for cars? And I actually have the really fortunate position to work with international delegations from all over the world who come to Amsterdam to learn about sustainable urban development, or smart urban development, or future-proof urban development, whatever you want to call it, whatever the latest buzz is. And it seems that every other person I talk to these days thinks that autonomous vehicles is going to solve, if not all, a lot of our problems in the near future. And as you see in this video by MIT, and I'm sure many of you are already familiar with this concept, the idea is that by communicating with each other, these vehicles will be able to seamlessly interact so that they no longer have to stop at traffic lights, and that's the way to fix congestion in the future. Now, this is one vision of future modernity, of future mobility. It is complex. We don't really know if it's going to work. It is expensive. So I want to show you another vision of future mobility, and that is not a vision for the future, but it's actually existing. This happens on Amsterdam streets every day. And what you see here is a really high level of interconnectivity that people are capable of simply through eye contact and simple interactions. And many experts agree that autonomous vehicles it will be very difficult for them to achieve this kind of connectivity even 10 or 20 or 30 years from now. And whenever I share this kind of video or story with people, then typically they immediately react by saying, well, okay, but Amsterdam has always been a bike paradise, and we are not Amsterdam. So what I want to show you today is that, in fact, Amsterdam was not always Amsterdam either. So, after the Second World War, Amsterdam embraced a car-centric future of modernity. This was a time when American experts used to come to Amsterdam and other Dutch cities to tell them what it meant to be ready for the future. And that basically meant embracing the car. And luckily, this particular plan never came to pass. But in fact, the city did undertake a lot of projects and breakthroughs, and large parts of the city needed to be destroyed to make room for these modernist highways. And in fact, in just a decade, the number of cars in the city quadrupled, in a city that was not meant for cars historically. And you have to imagine that public spaces and spaces that were used for markets and for public interaction were being converted into parking lots. And this was widely across the city and widely across Dutch cities in general. And the breaking point actually came in the 70s as the number of traffic fatalities continued to increase as a result of this car-centric approach. And that was actually what led to a bottom-up revolution where people came together and they demanded something different. And it was primarily because people could remember a time before the car. So they demanded a city that is, again, safe for children to walk and bike to school and to play in their neighborhoods. So this was what's called the Stop the Child Murder campaign. It was very, very powerful. But it was very much a bottom-up movement. And eventually, after about a decade of people protesting and guerrilla action, the politicians reacted. And they took a very different approach that prioritized people outside the car instead of people inside the car. So about 30 years later, now delegations come from all over the world to see the transformation of the city, and these are some examples. And what you see is that the streets are no longer dominated by parked or moving cars, but they're actually dominated by people on foot and on bike. This is one of these modernist breakthroughs that was built during the 70s, where you used to have traffic on two levels, so they don't interfere with each other. That was the city of the future again, according to the 1960s. And now most of the space has been reclaimed for people on foot and on bike. And where you used to have cars underground previously, now you have a large playground for children. So it's a really nice symbolic example of transitioning or transforming from a city for cars to a city for people. This is another example, and you really see how different the city feels. And it's not just about, it's no longer about cars, it's also about improving green space and having places where neighbors can meet and interact with each other. Now the problem, in fact, is too many parked bikes, so different issue to deal with, but those are being tackled as well. And one of my favorite examples, and I love this example also because Amsterdammers themselves don't realize how car-centric their city used to be. This is Museumplein. This is the cultural heartbeat of the country. And people forget that just 30 years ago, this used to be called the shortest highway in the city because you used to have these buses speeding up and down to the Rijksmuseum in the background. And the thought was that tourists will only come to your city if they can jump from the bus into the museum. And nowadays, we know that's not true. We know that people are coming to Amsterdam precisely because it's a city where you can walk and stroll and flirt and picnic and do all these things that you cannot do if you just have noise and traffic pollution all around you. So at a time when everyone is talking about the future, and that's obviously very sexy, it's not very attractive to talk about the past. But I think that's actually really something that can improve our cities a lot, is to look back to see forwards. And that's what you see here is the way actually Amsterdam, but you can do this with any city around the world, has transitioned from a city dominated by people before the Second World War to a city dominated by cars after the Second World War. And in Amsterdam's case, it's had a combination of wisdom and luck and hard work to really reclaim that city again for people and bikes. And that's where I would like to ask you with closer to home. This is an example of Cluj. And I wonder if you can look back to see forward. Because very similarly, I see the two phases in Cluj, before the car and during the car. And of course, the question is, what kind of city do you want Cluj to be in the future? And here is another example. So what does the street of the future look like to you? And I want to finish off with an example of what the street of the future looks like to me. So I'm just going to let you enjoy the sights and the sounds of that. It's not perfect, by the way. You'll hear the scooters very soon. So to finish it off, I think indeed autonomous vehicles and many other innovations will make our cities smarter, more livable, more attractive. But I think the bigger question that we should be asking ourselves is what are cities for in the first place? So should we still build our cities around cars, or is it really about building our cities around people? Thank you.
Don't think that your decision will affect the next quarter or the next year, etc.? What if your decision today would affect all of eternity?